I mean, both of you had now like this explicitness, like as a topic also, and also like talking about courage and risk in that, and like why. Maybe two things. Like, I mean, in your lecture, there was like this question of, or like the distrust. Is there nothing to say about, or what is the problem even, or like even like some things are wrong, but nobody kind of forms the wrongness or something even, and you like had like a more clear like statement about like counterculture, or like already like some fight thing going on, which also is maybe related to the question again on coming from a different how we discuss and what topics we discuss, or like who is forming the discourse. So I mean, it's not a question now yet, but
I can say a bit to that, because when I was thinking about this sort of explicitness that somehow so positively reverberates in me if I meet it, and sometimes it's just historical positions where I meet it, but sometimes it's even contemporary positions, then I was also thinking that now what I'm doing is actually somehow meeting with what the right-wing audience in Germany at the end, I'm really talking about Germany now, is constantly doing, and they are saying we are not allowed to say anything anymore. So we don't say it. We, you know how so I'm not going to tell it to you because it's anyway going to be, the lying press and however this is called. So there's another discourse which is coming from the right where they say we don't dare being explicit. But then I thought, so yeah, maybe if I'm now asking for that, at the other hand, then then I'm going into this direction and say we are not allowed to talk anymore. We are like, but then I was thinking that actually there was something else that this right-wing argument was building up, and it was more that they are threatening us with saying, if I would say it. But basically they don't have anything to say. They are always just saying, I'm not saying it. The right wings, this normal public. When you have heard that at these demonstrations or so, Pegida demonstrations or something like this, and then the journalists come and then they hold the microphone, and then they always say, I'm not going to tell you that because you're anyway going to make a lie out of it, and I'm not allowed to say anything anymore in Germany, and our voices are anyway not heard. You know this argument. I don't know if this is in Austria the same, but in Germany it's very much like this. But actually what they are doing is that they are threatening you all of the time with this argument, if I would say it, and they're not saying it. Because if they would, so we are like totally threatened and think the right, I guess, what awful things they would say, but they are not saying it because they are also threatening the consequences. This is one thing. But also then you could like somehow go into this, then it would be also so easily to discard, because then you can argue, you can say this is just bullshit. This is not the facts, it's not whatever. But naturally there is something by calling for voices. You also have this risk that you are like calling for lots of different voices. But I've once also been like discussing for some time with Chantal Mouffe, who has this sort of, she's asking, or she's, how would you say, she's making a plaidoyer for something that is called the agonistic society, and at this time I didn't understand what agonistic means, so maybe someone doesn't know it. It means that it's a society that is not antagonistic, which would mean that they are like totally opposed, but they are in a sort of struggle. An agonistic position is a position that is in a position between different sort of positions, or a situation between different sort of positions, where they have different opinions, and they are in a struggle, but they are still in a productive struggle. They are not making this antagonism and say, okay, you are like this, I'm like this, but they are in this agonistic sort of way of dealing with aushandeln, verhandeln eine Situation. And at that time, I was naturally not so very impressed by it. But then I was thinking maybe I should give it a try with this agonistic society. But this is one thing. Another thing is what I think that or to put it the right way, I think that feminist discourse and the second wave feminist discourse, and I'm totally your opinion, has actually provided us with a lot of insights and a lot of explicit voices that we should listen again to, because then afterwards it has been denounced again, and all of the positions of these people have been made fun of, and there were like huge sort of backlashes. But then actually there are other movements that have taken up whatever has been developed in the second wave feminism, and some of it, I would say, is really the black pessimism movement. And now we can, at the other hand, use it again to define our situation. Because what they say, and this is this analogism, and this is so funny when I saw this with this, I can talk about it because I'm an Arab myself. So when you are taking this and when you are taking black pessimism and the argument that they are having, they say, actually we are going out into the streets and we are thinking we are like humans, but someone will always see you as a black person. It's not that you have to define it yourself, and it's not that, but in this definition, they will always find you, they will always see you, they will always tell you, but you're a black person. You just walk out into the street and you're just someone. But after some time, you will get this notice that you are actually black. The same thing with a woman. You can walk, I mean, normally I go into the street, I'm not even thinking about it, but within some time, and when I went into school, and I was just excited about going to school, but then I just noticed that I'm a girl, because they were like putting me into this sort of corner, I was like put over there. So I was somehow, but then I noticed also, this is the thing that is, that it's not about your own definition or so, but the ones who are putting you there and who are saying, there's a woman over there, they always like will know you. Even if you're like dressed, you can do a lot in changing, and people have been growing beards and everything, but still they somehow will always see you. They will find you out or so, and they also have an interest. But the ones who are like finding you, and they are the ones who have in the beginning already defined what is the difference between a man and a woman. Because in this sort of medical, historical complex or so, it was not women who have been inventing that. So it was coming up, all of the definitions about it, the way how it was placed, the hierarchies. This was not done in the same way by the ones who were singled out as women and by the other ones who were singled out as men or so, but it was naturally always done by the men. So you're sorted into a system that you have not even had a chance for a long time to even somehow do something about it, and this is the same like with black people. They're sorted into this system. Actually, there is no real definition about who is black and who is white, but they are like sorted into something that has not come from them. Maybe they wouldn't have even come up with a sort of oppositional sort of something is white, something is black. Maybe if this would have come from our sort of history, we wouldn't have invented that there are men and there are women. But it had been invented during all of this time when we didn't have a talk into it. So we were like sorted into this weak position. And now what they are saying is, it's not about, I mean, you can also feel well there also. I mean, if you are sorted into this position of being a woman, this is what many people say, you have more choices, for example, with dresses, and so you can dress up nicer. And so seemingly some people might feel even might even get subjectivity out of it, of being sorted into this. But the ones who actually suffer because they just walk out into the street and they become women because someone tells them they are the ones that are actually in need of a discussion. And this is what black pessimism says. It says, it's not about if we are black, it's about that you see us as black, so we have a problem. So we are seen as the black people by you, so we have to somehow gather and discuss what this means for us. And this is the same thing then afterwards. And I'm always making this comparison. This is what I was talking about. Why do we need parallel stories? And this is why I was asking, why does she need a parallel story when she's saying me talking as an Arab? Because the discourse, when it comes up to feminism or to women or so, is such a denounced discourse. It was always like made fun of. It's nobody really is taking, it's just very few times when it was really taking serious. But then always, whatever, it always comes up, it is boring, there's like so many, so this is why we are like inventing these parallel stories to make it more clear, so what happens. So I had this other parallel story, which is actually a sort of cartoon. And I just want to say it. There's this bear, and the bear is hiding, it's an image. There's the bear, and he's hiding behind the tree. And then you see what the bear is thinking, and you see a hunter in the background. And the bear is thinking, he has something against me. And I don't know why, but I have to think now why he has something against it to find out the strategy. And this is the thing, there is something, you notice it, and you have to, this is what separatism is. It's not women, it's not something, it's the people who are addressed as women and are astonished about that, and they somehow need to somehow gather and find a way of how to solve that. This is what I wanted to say.
Sure. Just a statement or a question from Amanda.
Yeah, well, there is, but it also occurs to me that we'll be in conversation later. So if there is another, okay, because I just had a kind of invitation for thinking or making a connection between the talks, but it's really about this notion of risk and what it means to act and what it means to not control the response that one gets from what they do. Because this is really, there's another tradition we could cull from, which would be the thought of Hannah Arendt, who says that to act is precisely to not know what the consequences will be. And I think that this is a nice way to maybe offer a critique, but posit another possibility also in relation to this Texte zur Kunst text. Because if the idea or the sense was that there's a kind of environment of control that seems to come out of that there's an alternative way that we can posit something that's maybe about like beautiful action, and so not just about like critiquing it, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of ironic that there's a lot of, well, I think there's a confusion actually between, well, a lot of confusion around causation, right? The idea of like something causing harm, and it's not really clear where the harm is demonstrated. I mean, you know, we could say at the very least everybody is capable of causing harm and everybody's capable of being harmed. You know, nobody is exempt from this, double-edged form of suffering and causing suffering, right? I mean, we're all these beings, you know, and sometimes we're both at the same time. And I think, you know, there's often, it's very strange, you know, I mean, Deleuze talks about this indignity of talking on behalf of others, and often you get these kind of discourses which are proclaiming to be about protecting particular oppressed people in certain ways, but in a way that discourse itself is then used quite sadistically, you know, and this is very, very, very complicated, and that sometimes the discourse is understood to be an action, or sometimes, you know, this idea that words are violent. And I'm not disputing that words can be violent, for example. It's not to say that they're not, but that who gets to say which words are violent in which way is also a question of power and control, very much so, you know, and the people who are kind of stating that certain sentences said by certain people must therefore be much more harmful and must be controlled and must be stopped. I'm very interested in example in what it might mean to bring people together in forms of dialogue, a group dialogue or individual dialogue. I personally have called for all of the people who have attacked me anonymously and otherwise to speak to me one-on-one or in a group, or, you know, kindly, you know, with protection so they won't feel afraid or whatever. I mean, as if I'm going to hurt them, but, you know. I'm very interested, for example, and maybe can we just talk a little bit about this, because like Hilke Wagner's deal in Dresden was reported. So, you know, when she's the director of the Albertinum Museum, right, in Dresden. You know about this story? So basically, you know, Dresden has a lot of AfD supporters, and you know, people very critical of her for she's a director, not showing enough GDR art in the first place. But then this became a discussion, at least this is how it was reported, about what is and isn't shown in the museum. So particularly about Dresden history, the bombing of Dresden by the Allies, when 90% of the city is destroyed, and lots of people are saying, look, you know, why isn't this museum reflecting the history of the city or our particular concerns? And you could say, well, look, these are right-wing people saying this, therefore, you know, who cares what they say, right? They're all bad, you know, they're just pretending that they can't say what it is they really want to talk about. But what if people genuinely feel that they're not being heard, and they develop serious resentment? We can also talk about men and the whole discourse of who resents who and how and why. But so what she does in the end, she gets all of this criticism, she gets like threats, she gets kind of emails and phone calls saying that she must leave. And she says, all right, let's invite everybody in, right? So they have this huge discussion, like 600 people, to talk about what the museum is and what it should and shouldn't show, people's different opinions and so on. Okay, and in a way, this is a very different and interesting, and she says, and other people say, extremely positive outcome. So people feel heard, not just feel heard, but are actually listened to. And this question of listening is also very important, like not just from a psychoanalytic perspective, like actually hearing what people are saying on multiple levels. But if people feel heard, it's also the question of content. Like, we do disagree. Like, we do live in a fucking antagonistic world where people have different opinions about different things for different reasons. You know, and to pretend that there's one discourse which is going to, like, solve all the problems and everyone just has to go along with it and then everything will be fine isn't true. We don't live in that world, right? And so I don't know, I'm interested in like, maybe even this idea of like encounter groups. What does it mean to bring people together who like violently disagree with one another at the level of discourse, right? This was a kind of idea in the end of the late 60s, early 70s, you know, to have people express their feelings, you know, and you know, whether we think their feelings are accurate or not, that in the process of discussing them, perhaps come to a different kind of point on both sides, you know, to understand that everybody suffers. Everybody feels at some point that they're like a victim. Everybody feels, you know, that they're not being heard. Everybody feels this, you know, and to start from there, actually, you know, as a way of kind of having a dialogue. I don't know. I'm very interested in these kind of projects, at least.
I think it's also interesting in this, I mean, I agree, but it's also interesting in what you also mentioned, like alternative form and like what kind of space, like how do we organize these kinds of projects? Like if you want to, I mean, there's like, you kind of, there's a spontaneous situation, like, I mean, this is also kind of a spontaneous situation already, even if it's organized. But like there is like, I think it's interesting to also educate about the various ways of possible formats, how you could meet, like, it
doesn't need to be that complicated. Though.
No, but I think it's important to kind of also kind of think about it, not as a control, like means of a control for a desired outcome or something. Just, yeah.
I mean, like all the people attacking me anonymously online, I put out a public call for them to meet me, right, in the park, and I said, like, I'll buy your train ticket, you know? Sure. And this kind of thing, I mean, what else is there in a way? Like, there isn't another world, like we live in this one.
No, but there's like different groups and different discourses, and everybody speaks, like has a connection to various ways of organizing yourself.
Right, but I mean, everyone's discourse is incomplete. Like, nobody has a kind of some total, you know, they might, you know, we disagree. And I don't know, I mean, of course, it's like people can say, no, I don't want to meet you. I only want to be online and I just want to say these things here. Oh, I mean, what? Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm interested in, I suppose, preventing, insofar as it's possible, social spirals, for example, of paranoia and enmity, where you have groups ganging up on other groups on the basis of identity, which is the history of fucking violence and war, right? How do we get to, like, stop these kind of spirals, which are, you know, endless? I mean, maybe we can't prevent them, but the idea of nuance, of ambivalence, of understanding, like that we share some things in common, we might disagree on others. You know, I think there are some people very invested in making huge divisions and isolating and ostracizing particular people, particular views, particular groups, often on the basis that they are the ones who are good. You know, and this is also something, the purity spiral, to avoid like feeling that one must be good, that one is good because one has the right opinion. This is very dangerous. Yeah.
I have the mic, so maybe this is an example of what you mentioned before, this naughtiness versus the edgelordness or something, like appropriating this. I mean, this feminization of people or like of structures to oppress them in a way, to reappropriate this feminization and deploy it in another way that is kind of hidden in this risk of the second order, so to say, like the risk itself in a way, and then I like very much this comparison of this naughtiness and something like trying to stop this spiral without being directly against the spiral or something.
Yes, exactly. This is
And
because
at the end, the question is like, I mean, like this edgelordness is like quasi embedded in internet structures already, like how it works and how directly this confrontation is and anonymous. Like, is there any way you could imagine, or I don't know, how to make this naughtiness specifically online? You know, like.
Yes, this is an excellent question. I did some work on this, like edgelords and edgeladies, right? So this idea, you know, because like the edgelord is often this often dismissed character, right? The idea that someone is a provocateur online, where it's actually, of course, very easy to be provocative. You can be anonymous. You can have a you know, whatever, a name that isn't yours, that's dissociated from you. You can kind of, you can mock. You can be ironic. You can be whatever. You can be. Say things that you wouldn't be able to say in person or whatever, and sometimes it's funny. And I think there's often like a misunderstanding of the humorousness, like some things are being taken more seriously than they actually deserve in a certain way, and then there's a fear generated, oh, these young men are making memes, oh my god, memes are terrifying, you know, like. So yeah, so I'm very interested in the gendering of this, because it does tend to be very male. Just as Wagner said, like most of the people criticizing her all of them were men, apart from one, who were attacking her curatorship of the museum in Dresden. So yeah, this idea of like a certain kind of playfulness, it's also, okay, this is a bit weird, a bit metaphysical, but like if you think about zeros and ones and like the binary code of like the internet in a way, like we live in that world, like we live in, since the invention of zero as a kind of proper number, as it were, right? So zero became like activated, and then we, you know, directly leads to the computer in some strange way. This is a bit 2001, but as opposed to the zero, the activated zero, like the idea of the naught, which is sort of like just a kind of emptiness, a sort of nothingness, which is like not quite as terrifying as the zero or the void in a certain way, but like, I don't know, I'm obsessed with like sort of pixies and sprites and these sorts of like funny creatures who just sort of do naughty things. I guess probably because I was in the Brownies, like you're forced to, you know, when you're like a girl. Anyway, Brownies is just some weird quasi-church social group. And, yeah, they're obsessed with these fairies and these sorts of strange creatures which inhabit the British Isles. And obviously Britain is in chaos, like it's a nightmare. Being Britain is like such a terrible place in so many ways at the moment. So divided. And yeah, so the idea of like a naughtiness that was like playful but not harmful, you know, where people, like it's about testing limits and about sort of, you know, laughing at oneself and getting people to laugh at themselves as well, which again is like really necessary for preventing forms of social paranoia and spiraling and us and them mentality. Because if you can laugh at yourself and realize that you know, you're an idiot, like everyone's an idiot, you know, at most of the time, this is actually, you know, it calms things down. You know, it stops these like fervent.
It's not why we laugh. Like, who makes the joke that we laugh about? Like, make good jokes in a way.
Yeah,
like
and of course, humor can be cruel. Laughter can be cruel, and it's double-edged, right? It's never to say, oh, laughter is always good and humor is always on the side of, you know, social harmony. Of course not. It isn't. It's very complicated. Humor is always. Comedy, whatever you want to say, is always also on the edge. It's always on the edge of what can and can't be said within a particular social context. You know, it's playing with the edge. It has to. But I think there are kind of ways of doing it. And this does maybe, I don't know, I mean, of course, I'm saying, in a way, my more playful, you know, feminist or even feminine naughtiness versus edgelordism, which can be much more brutal. Yeah, of course, is playing also with gender stereotypes of, like, being kinder and so on. But in a way, I also think this is playful. You know, I like the idea of like a female Diogenes, you know, like in a barrel, like saying things on the edge of the city. It's not outside the city or the internet, let's say. It's somehow like on there.
There was another voice.
Is this working? I've never done this. Okay. I just want to respond to several things actually. First of all, towards the black pessimism, it's just one quick side note that there's actually also the thinking that they are not interested in what we are thinking or projecting on towards them. And I think this is a very interesting or very important thing that we have to keep in mind, especially because we are a very wide crowd here right now. And then I find it very hard to follow Nina Power's talk, actually, because I don't think that everybody has read the Texte zur Kunst article. I'm very sure that
I barely mentioned it, though.
What?
Ariane mentioned it first.
Yeah, but not the whole. I mean, it's the article is not like a personal attack. It's more as a that's what I get the feeling here, that it's like a very general response to it, because but it does actually mention a lot of different critiques towards very specific artworks, and I think we really get lost here, because it's not. We are not referring to specific artworks and art. So it's and all different things are getting mixed up as like being black, being a woman. So it's like maybe a bit too broad. So yeah.
I honestly didn't get the article part. Like, I don't know which article we're talking about, or if it's about an article or something.
That's what I'm saying.
But I think like it's about something else. Like, it's not about the article.
But it is about the article. Not only, but it is.
So there was an article mentioned that was published in latest Texte zur Kunst, and it's called Social Sadism. And I mean, my opinion on your comment is like, I mean, that's happening often, that it's talked about texts and books that not everybody has read. So, I don't know.
But may I say something?
But I don't understand the problem, but anyway, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you have been when I was talking, because I was like talking about this article a little bit longer, what it actually did and what it was showing and so on. And then afterwards you were just very briefly saying something about it. But the other thing is, this argument is actually what I wanted to do, and this is why I'm very happy that you said it. This is actually this tactic that was taken up in 1974 by the feminists, and they said, we are leaving now. And Fulvia Carnevale did this very nice talk about the Italian feminists in 74, when they were leaving at the same time everything. They were leaving the Communist Party, they were leaving the parliament, they were leaving the families. And she says, the feminist leaves, which means we now need the time. We are actually not interested anymore what this order that we have not built up and that we were not even admitted to is saying about us, and we don't want to talk with it anymore, but we are like trying to find out what actually is happening, and this we can only do between ourselves. And Black Pessimism has this argument as well. He says, we don't care what you talk about us, and this is the same thing. This would be this group of people who is so like a little bit astonished about being constantly put into this category of women by someone who has already defined these two categories, because they are coming from somewhere, from a historical, medical sort of system that was not allowing women into these academies, that was not allowing women into the... So in the time when it formed, we were not part of it, but now we are subjected to it, and the same thing with racism, naturally. So this very nice argument that they're saying, we don't care, maybe you could be a little bit interested what the people whom you all of the time subjected to be the minority or to be the weaker parts or to have all of these thoughts, also, what they had been thinking. If you are clever, then you would learn something about your system. This is what they are saying, and the same thing is what I would say. If you are clever, then you male people and also you female people who identify with this system also could learn a little bit about your system, how you build that up, on concurrency, how the academic system functions, for example, which is also totally built up on concurrency and how we would have to. And meanwhile, but actually I don't care if they learn or not. Because actually there is this problem, or there's the far more interesting problem, and I found it out in several groups where I was lately in Berlin. These people who have this problem, because they are subjected to be women even when they don't even feel as women, because what is a woman also? This is what she says in Scum Manifesto. We get all of these adjectives there. We are like emotional, we are nature, we are something. I'm not very nature. I mean, I come from... And I'm also not very emotional, actually, and I also don't have a big love conception. Some people always suffer because I don't have, but anyway. But I will always be found as a woman, still. People will tell me I am also, even when I just don't know. So these people are a little bit astonished about that they are constantly addressed as something they are not. They could gather and they could somehow leave this system that has placed them somewhere and find out how the ways out would maybe work. And this is the same in black pessimism. I don't really care how this academic, scientific system is dealing with the question of women or whatever. I have other things to do and I want to do them with the people who also have these things to do.
One more. I think we then close.
Okay.
One more question or comment.
Hello. Shall I stand? Okay, I'll stand. Thank you. I guess I was just thinking, when you were talking about self-censorship and kind of the sense of being explicit and losing control and allowing yourself to lose control and having risk with those things, kind of. What you think about kind of from a space of solidarity, right? So not trying to, say what you can't say or not say, but from a place of solidarity, kind of being sensitive to the complexity that is people's experience and what people have had and the complexity of what it is to be. So Fred Morton has a phrase which I love, which is treading carefully on the earth and treading carefully with each other. So not to say that someone can't say this, but instead of thinking that like what you say it doesn't belong to you, it's not your private property, right? It's something that exists through the encounter of who you're speaking with and their experiences and your own experiences, and it becomes kind of a moment of collective engagement and kind of the difficulty in shaping your words in accordance to the complexities of everyone's experience, if that makes sense. So yeah, just kind of what you think about that, like sort of solidarities and the way that plays into it. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, like, one should try not to be an asshole. I mean, everybody has an experience. Everybody is, suffering an experience or enjoying an experience. I think there's sometimes a very complicated way of like disavowing one's own being or existence, which is something that women have like historically been trained to do in lots of ways, actually. And there's a kind of interesting question brought up by the question, like punk, amongst other things. What does it mean to refuse, actually, to always be the one who listens, who is kind, who cares, who's empathetic, Like, of course, at a certain point, you're going to go, fuck that shit. No way. It's not my job to listen to you. You know what I mean? Like, these are moments, right? Within a kind of, perhaps coercion of care and, this kind of thing, right? It's very complicated. Like how one cares, who one cares for. There is the question of the social, right? I think everyone should be as kind to each other as they possibly can be, to treat each other as, as with respect and with concern, but not also be afraid to defend oneself if one is under attack or being kind of, I think to assert the right to one's own thought and to one's own speech is also an important moment. Otherwise, you are going to get situations where people are going to mobilize discourses in a sadistic way, whilst pretending to be kind. And I think this is a very difficult thing to have to acknowledge as well, that not everybody is like well-intentioned. We want to assume, we want to live in a world of trust. Our trust is absolutely split all the time and splintered by a certain kind of like capitalist, consumerist culture and emphasis on images and blah, blah, blah. Like it is actually quite difficult to find trust, to find actual solidarity, if you want to use that word. Often people who talk about solidarity behave in completely non-solidaritous ways, So like just because someone says they're a good person or a nice person doesn't mean they actually are. It is about behavior. It is about action. It's about, I don't know. Yeah, like being coterminous with the way one thinks and speaks, right, in the moment, to not be disingenuous, and to be honest. But to be honest is very difficult because you get punished.
Yeah, but this is maybe why we are doing this magazine. I've been thinking about it. I don't know if this is on. I don't think. Yeah. And the thing is that there are some people who chosen now to speak in these sort of parallel ways by describing, or even in actions. And this is why I was starting this talk by saying I was reminded that you can also be explicit by doing something, and it's not that you only have to say it or so. But naturally what we then try is, if we collect these voices, and then there could be something like a solid, like this backfoil that could then afterwards develop again, where there is a possibility to voice something. And if you have someone, then you will have another voice who can afterwards answer. And this, but somehow with this magazine, because we are a little bit, why does nobody address anything? And then we say maybe they are already addressing it in this sort of parallel way by doing this, writing a science fiction story, writing a crime novel, writing about something that is super historically or so. Maybe they're already voicing it, but they cannot really do it because there is not, but then it will somehow emerge, and this is maybe why this could still be done. And it should be a sort of safe thing, which means that there is someone who is protecting it, and this is why I was a little bit astonished in this Texte zur Kunst, why they had the advertisement there, and also what you mentioned, that it was called Evil, and so how many different sort of informations you actually got with one magazine, and how disparate this was. But there's also the other thing with this, what I mentioned with Virginie Despentes, that she noticed that you cannot be sure that something that was once a solidarity community or so will be it forever or so. And this is what she saw between King Kong theory and between Werner and Subutex, is that actually the people, when they just have this community in the background, but they are not constantly in contact, and this life which is impoverishing them, and which is making them poor, so they somehow split up, or they are just alone in the world, and all of them became fascists because they were just said, they had the same background, but at the same time they were totally alone, and they couldn't build up this solidarity thing anymore. So the backfoil is not the only thing, something has to be more active also in this sort of community thing.